Hello, my lovely podcast family. Thank you so much for being here as always. Today, I'm honored to have one of North America's foremost authorities on dietary fats and oils, Dr. Udo Erasmus, joining me. With a background in biochemistry, genetics, and nutrition, Udo has spent over 4 decades pioneering the healthy fats and healthy oils movement. As the co-founder of Udo's Choice supplement brand and the author of Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, he has been a leading voice in raising manufacturing standards for food oils, and through his work and advocacy has improved the health of millions of people. In our conversation today, we'll delve deep into the world of dietary fats, busting myths and exploring the vital importance of healthy fats for hormonal balance and overall well-being. Back in the 90s, low-fat diets were all the rage, leaving many of us struggling with hormonal imbalances and unhealthy eating habits. Udo shares his journey as a proponent of healthy fats and enlightens us on the critical differences between healthy and unhealthy fats. We'll explore the misconceptions around low-fat diets and the factors that have contributed to this belief system persisting across the world. The great butter versus margarine debate will also take center stage as we discuss their nutritional composition, health effects, and potential risks. We'll also talk about why his supplements contain omega-3, 6, and 9 oils rather than just sources of omega-3 oils, which is a big topic of conversation with all the talk of seed oils and omega-6 fatty acids being so bad for you. Udo also shares his take on the fish oil industry and the inherent problems he sees with fish oil-based supplements. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please feel free to share it on Instagram and tag me at Nicole M. Jardim and Udo at Udo Erasmus, and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. Thank you so much and enjoy the episode. Hi, Udo. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you for having me on.
I am thrilled. Yes, I am thrilled to have this conversation with you. And, I would love for us to actually talk about how you became such a proponent of fat and educating people on the difference between healthy and unhealthy fats.
Okay, well, that was not, when I slid out of my mother's body, that was definitely not part of my plan.
I have no doubt.
I came from Europe. I was a war kid. We were refugees fleeing the communists chasing us in tanks and trucks. We were on dirt roads in horse-drawn hay wagons. The Allies, the good guys, were using us for target practice. There was no military presence on those roads. And it was mostly young mothers and young children. And so we eventually made it out. It was horrendous. I was 2.5 years old. It was winter. It was crazy. I got left behind. I ended up in an orphanage. It was like a messy story. Oh. And I always got, like, when I was a kid at 6, I listened to people argue about really stupid things. And the thought came to me, man, there must be a way that people can live in harmony. And this little cocky voice, above a 6-year-old who doesn't know how complicated everything is, I'm going to find out how. And so that's been my driver all my life, because I learned really early how bad it can get when we don't pay attention, when we don't cultivate peace, when we don't cultivate generosity, when we don't cultivate whatever it is that it takes to live in harmony. And so that was the beginning. And I got into science because I was really very insecure and nervous and never felt safe. So I went into science to understand how things work. Because when you know how things work, you get a certain amount of predictability, and there's a certain amount of security in that. Right? And science is about predicting and controlling. Then I got into biosciences because I wanted to figure out how creatures work. And then I got into psychology because I wanted to figure out how thinking works. And then I got into medicine for a year, and because I wanted to know what health is. And we only learned about disease. So I ended up going back into biological sciences, biochemistry and genetics, because that's where you learn how health works, because you're studying normal creatures in normal situations, living normally, right? So that's the study of health, but nobody calls it that. So I had to figure that out. And then I got left university, and there was still other stuff going on, and I got married, and we had 3 kids, and my marriage broke up, and I was really upset. And I got a job as a pesticide sprayer because I wanted to kill something. And so I sprayed very carelessly for 3 years. And then I got poisoned by the pesticides I sprayed. And I went to the doctor and said, what do you have for pesticide poisoning? And she said, nothing. And that was the day I became super interested in health. And I had the background, so I could get into the journals. and started reading about minerals and vitamins, essential nutrients, essential amino acids from proteins, essential fatty acids from fats. And I got stuck in the area of fats because it was really complicated. Because I read a study, it said omega-6 is an essential nutrient. You have to have it to live and be healthy. If you don't get enough long enough, you die. If you bring it back in adequate quantities before you die, then all the problems that come from not getting enough are reversed. That's the definition of an essential nutrient. So omega-6 is an essential nutrient and comes from oils. And the very next study I read, it said omega-6 gives you cancer and kills you. And my head exploded. It was like, well, how can you have to have it to live and be healthy, and then gives the cancer and kills you. And so I said that there must be something I'm missing that accounts for this difference. And so I started digging really deep, and I found out how much damage is done to oils by the way they're processed by industry, and did the math on that. And it turns out in a tablespoon of an oil that is 1% damaged by processing, well, I should ask you, how many damaged molecules do you think you would find in that tablespoon?
Oh my goodness. Many?
Just a guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
many is not a number. I want a number. There's
You
a
want a
reason why.
number?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I know nothing about molecules.
I
I
know.
would say I would say thousands. I mean, like 10,000.
Okay, so 10,000. So the actual number is 60 quintillion.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, so you had 4 zeros on your number, and
Yeah.
you should have had 19 zeros. So
Okay.
your estimate is more than 1 trillion times too low. And people don't know that when they use these oils, they actually are doing something to themselves that's 1 trillion times worse than they imagine.
Oh,
And then,
that's
so then the
sobering.
question becomes, when you know that, as soon as you find that out, maybe you need to rethink how you're doing oils. And maybe you need oils made with health in mind rather than with shelf life in mind. And maybe you shouldn't use them for frying, because, because when you fry oils, you damage them by the simultaneous effect of light, oxygen, and heat on the oils. And frying is the dumbest thing we've ever invented to do to our food, because whether you fry proteins or you fry starches or you fry the oils, each one independent of the others increases inflammation and increases your risk of cancer. And when I found that out, I said, well, we need to make oils with health in mind. I developed a method for doing it. It has to be a very tight system because oils are our most sensitive nutrients.
Right.
And so they need the most care. We actually give them the least care. So throw out your frying pan, hit yourself on the head with it before you do, so you remember that it's a painful thing. That frying will give you pain. And anyway, so that's, and by the way, that's as a prelude to what we're going to talk about, the low-fat conspiracy. In 1977, Senator McGovern published the report on nutrition and health. And in that report, they put carbs at the bottom of the food pyramids, which is what you're supposed to eat the most. They put fats on top, which is what you should eat the least. But this is completely mistaken, because they didn't understand that the problem with fats was not the fats. The problems with fats was the damage done to them by the processing and the way we use them in food.
No.
And nobody talked about the processing. They blamed the fats, they blamed the oils. And so we started that food pyramid in 1977, 1979, I think, is when they got around to the food pyramid. And then in 20 years, overweight went from 25 to 60% of the American population. Right. And nobody questioned the food pyramid. Carbs make you fat. If you eat more carbs than you burn, your body is forced to turn them into fat for storage, and you get overweight. But nobody talked about it, and they're still really not talking about it.
I know. I mean, this is something I really wanted to talk about. And you mentioned obviously the 70s and this shift in the food pyramid. And
Yeah,
I think back to my teenage years in the 90s. In fact, I have a funny line in my book that says something along the lines of, the 1990s called and they want their low fat diet back. And I distinctly remember being a teenager and thinking that fat was so bad. And I used to
yeah,
eat like an entire box of Snackwell's devil food cookie cakes in
yeah,
one
yeah, yeah,
sitting,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And
Because
like
they
those
were
are
fat
really
free.
good, right?
So good. I mean, they were fat
Yeah,
free, right? So, and I was that
yeah,
girl who was obsessively stuck in this idea that if I had more than 25 grams of fat in a day,
yeah,
I would put on weight.
yeah,
And so basically I was starving and no wonder my hormones were a complete disaster.
yep,
But there is this commonly held belief that low fat is still healthier.
yeah.
So let's get into that because I feel like from the 70s onwards, I know you can get into what happened in the 80s with the vilification of these fats. It's
Yeah,
crazy
yeah,
how it still lingers.
yeah. So, yeah, so the idea that fats will make you fat, it's kind of like the logic of a 6-year-old. Eat fat, get fat, right?
Right.
Simple connection, right? So it kind of works against the truth about fats. Because fats, when you eat fats, they actually suppress appetite. So overeating fat is not that easy. When you take too much fat at any one time, your liver has to process the fat. And if you get too much, your liver will make you feel heavy, tired, or nauseous. And that'll stop you eating. Because if you ate more when you were nauseous, you would throw up. And that's your liver protecting itself from you overdoing it. So fats are not, there's a built-in mechanism, even though fats have 9 calories per gram and carbs only 4. And that made people say, oh, well, yeah, but you eat the same amount of fat as carbs, then you're going to get so many more calories. Yeah, except the fats stop you eating. The fats stop you eating, and carbs do the opposite. They turn on fat production. If you eat too many carbs, you flood your blood sugar. That's a dangerous condition. So then insulin comes and dumps it into your cells. And in your cells, you burn what you can in your activity. And any that's left over has to be turned into fat. And insulin's really good at getting it out of your bloodstream and into your cells. And then they turn into fat. And then you end up with low blood sugar. And when you get low blood sugar, then you get cravings. And your body's screaming, eat or die. And then you eat, and you tend to eat pretty fast because you got to get your blood sugar up, but it takes time to get that done because they have to be digested, and that takes time. By the time your blood sugar is back to normal, you've eaten more than you needed. And you start this next cycle of what's called carb addiction, which has been measured to be like 4 to 8 times stronger than the addiction to cocaine. And fats never do that with you. Fats, when you eat fats, you get stable energy. You don't get the ups and downs. You don't get the insulin, the mood swings, the cravings, the addiction. And so from that perspective, if you make fats your main fuel instead of carbs, then you're actually going to have better energy levels, and you're not going to, that's how you cure that addiction.
I feel like it's just I think back to that time and I basically was constantly hungry. I
Mm-hmm.
distinctly remember I would eat meals, but then afterwards I was constantly snacking. After dinner, I was having a bowl of cereal. I mean, it was just ridiculous when I look back at, just
Yeah,
how hungry I was. And obviously there was no connection. So
yeah.
when we're thinking about this low fat is healthier mentality, um, what has shifted? Because I feel like the research has really shifted now, and we're at the point where we're fully aware that fat is not the problem, but yet this
Yeah,
misconception still exists among
yeah.
so many of us across the world. So what's
Mm-hmm.
happening? Is it driven by these food companies and the marketing and the fact that it's actually cheaper to make foods that are low fat? What is it?
Well, in part, carbohydrates, you can dry them and powder them. You make them, whatever you make out of it. You Oils are sensitive to damage, so
Yeah.
they go rancid. So that's hard. So that if you want something that has a long shelf life, don't put any fat in them,
Mhm.
right? And carbs are perfect. You can stick them under your bed for 3 years, and then you can pull it out of under your bed and eat it, take the dust off, but and it's still okay. So their keepability is a big deal, right? But to go back to the argument, there are no essential carbohydrates. The essential nutrients that you got to have and you can't make, and you got to get from outside. And if you don't get enough long enough, you die. And if you bring them back before you die, then you recover. But there are no essential carbs that fit that definition. But there are two essential fatty acids that are essential by that definition: omega-3 and omega-6. And omega-3s are super, super, super health promoting. And the carbs are just fuel. And then the carbs, if you take the carbs and you turn them into white sugar and white flour, you're making fuel, but you've taken out the spark control. So the fuel builds a nice fire in your body. That's your energy. And you want to have lots of energy, right? It feels good to be juiced, right?
Definitely.
But if you have a good fire in your body, then you're going to have more sparks. They're called free radicals. And free radicals do damage in the tissue. They do random free damage in the tissues. So you need spark control too. But when the carbs are made, the white sugar, the white flour, and all of those convenience foods, you get the fuel, but you don't get the spark control. And they cause inflammation. Omega-3s are the only nutrient of all of our essential nutrients that they will build you a very good, strong fire. In fact, they build the strongest fire of any of our essential nutrients. And a part of them turns into spark control. How's that? That's really cool, right? You make the fire, but you also make the spark control out of the same molecules. It's like that's genius.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
I'm,
our food has a lot of answers for us if we're just willing to look for them.
yeah, but
Yeah,
then you have to also you also need to go back to eating foods the way nature made them,
right.
because every food has the same issue. It needs energy, but it also needs spark control. Spark control is antioxidants and anti-inflammatory molecules. Every whole food has some. Then when we refine them because we think we're smarter than nature and smarter than God, right? So then we've done all this. It's called better living through chemistry. We used to call it in the old days,
Yeah.
right? And it turns out that all our better living through chemistry hasn't made us healthier. It's made us sicker.
Mhm.
It's made us sicker. We get diabetes earlier now. Now our lifespan is decreasing. Average lifespan over the past few years has been decreasing. Kids are getting arthritis. Kids are getting diabetes in a way that never. The kids get autism, like never before. It was 1 in 10,000 people had autism when I was a kid. Now it's 1 in 34 or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're not getting healthier. We have more mental problems. We are more out of shape because we're also not working that hard, especially in the cities where you're not pulling weeds and digging vegetables, right? And so we're not getting healthier but there are companies who make an enormous amount of money on our stupidity or our ignorance that we need to eat whole foods in line with nature. Nature's mandate is fresh, whole, raw, organic, and for human beings, probably mostly plant-based. Wasn't like that everywhere, but the hunters, when they had rocks to hunt, came home empty-handed a lot. So when there's no meat, you eat vegetables because they don't run away and they don't fight back. So they're pretty easy to hunt down and kill, right? And so if you eat like that, that's nature's mandate for how to eat.
Yeah.
And then you can go in your kitchen and you can look around and see what you got in there in your fridge. And you say, well, how close am I to fresh, whole, raw, and organic? And then there's your answer. The gap between you and fresh, whole, raw, and organic is the gap where most of our degenerative conditions come from. So
Mhm.
you need to then say, okay, I need to take steps in the direction of fresh, whole, raw, organic again.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, there's so much there that I would love to unpack. I feel like we're talking about with regard to industry and the convenience of these
Yeah,
foods and and the quick energy and all of it. And it actually made me think about one of the talking points that your team had sent over to me, and it was about margarine versus butter. And
yeah,
I have distinct memories of no longer having butter in our house as a kid because the new messaging in the 80s and early 90s was that butter was bad and margarine was good. And I always
mhm,
remember thinking like, this doesn't really make any sense, but okay. The fact, honestly, though, that margarine is still even on the shelves just blow my minds, but it
yeah,
is. Here we are, and many people are still consuming it. So, can we just talk about that? Like again, the health
yeah,
implications of using margarine versus butter, and again, like what you were talking about with the processing of these fats that is so
yeah,
highly problematic.
yeah. The way I think of it is, look, butter keeps a calf alive, a creature alive, and margarine keeps an industry alive.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically is the point of it, right? She started in the 17th century to make cheap fats for the cheap people, like the lower classes,
Hmm.
and so they mixed. They started with beef tallow. It was like really weird stuff, and they mixed it all together. That was an invention by a Frenchman. And then what we got into it when you were a kid, we got into margarines made with trans fatty acids. And what we did is we took oils and we bubbled hydrogen through them, and that would then break the double bonds and partially saturate it. And these were called the partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, and that made them harder. So they were became spreadable, like butter is. And but then the trans fatty acids, the margarines were anywhere from 8 to 40% trans fatty acids. And trans fatty acids doubled risk of heart attack, interfered with immune function, interfered with reproductive function in both in both male and female animals. We never did human studies on that. And according to Harvard School of Public Health, we're killing 30,000 Americans every year. And so they got outed, I think it was in 2006 or somewhere around there. And then slowly, they'd had to be put on the label. They never had to be put on the labels even since 1911 when hydrogenation was invented, right? They never had to put it on the label. You could figure it out by subtracting polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated, and what was left between 100% and those three was trans fatty acids. But nobody knew that, and nobody got told that. You had to be like into the field to know that.
Mm.
So, and then we changed the margarines, and then instead of using trans fatty acids from cheap oils, we started using um, harder fats like coconut and palm kernel and things like that. But we're still using oils that have been treated with sodium hydroxide, phosphoric acid, then bleached, and then heated to frying temperature to clean them up, where that 1% damage comes from that we talked about at the beginning.
All
Where
right.
a tablespoon of an oil like that gives you 60 quintillion damaged molecules, which is more than 1 million damaged molecules for every one of your body's 60 trillion cells in one tablespoon. Now that's diluted a little bit by saturated fats that they add to it, but it's still you're still making it out of damaged starting material. And
Mm.
so, and then they put in colorings to make it look like butter, and sometimes they put in flavors to make it taste a little bit like butter. So they're kind of, doing the industry catch up on butter, right? But it took 4 billion years to develop a cow, and the industry's only had a few years, right? A few decades to mess with food.
Yeah.
And and like I said, and if there's a money sign at the end of it, oh, then we start thinking we're really smart and we can, oh my God, we can make so much money. Oh my God, and then it's driven by the profit, and then they cut corners, and then they try to find cheaper materials, and health is a treasure that needs care, right? But if you're just thinking about money, you're not thinking about health or life or treasure, other than bank, bank treasure. And so it's the same. It's the same thing. Like the food industries, they're always cutting corners. There are so many issues. In the fats industry, they lie. Sometimes they lie about their research results. If you're trained in science, you could pretty much design a study to prove anything you want just by changing the parameters.
I mean, wasn't that your experience when you read that first study and then read the second study that were
Well, the
completely
second
opposing?
well, the second study was opposing because the oils were damaged,
Right.
and the damaged oils damage the immune system, right? If they are not damaged, then they're essential. So they're essential, but don't damage them because they're the most sensitive of all of our nutrients. So they need the most care, and we give them the least.
Yeah.
And that's why I developed a method for making oils with health in mind, because I got poisoned. I said, well, I can't get healthy on oils like that. We should make them with health in mind. That means you have to make a very tight system so the oils are not damaged from the time they're in the seed, which is really good packaging, to the time they're in a brown glass bottle, in a box, nitrogen flushed, in the fridge, at the factory. And a lot of care has to be put into doing that. So those oils are more expensive, but they're also a lot better for health. And you can't use those oils for frying. You add them to foods after they come off the heat. See, with carbs, you don't have any of those issues. There are no essential carbs. That means carbs are actually the least important food. And you can just dry them and powder them and, make some crunchy stuff out of them, and you're starting with something that gives you no essential nutrients, that does give you some energy, that doesn't give you the minerals and vitamins, because a lot of those are partially taken out by the processing, right? So you're getting junk, but it keeps well.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it
and then
does.
the rest is advertising.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Pretty packaging. No
Yeah,
doubt.
pretty
I know.
packaging and advertising. Oh yeah, this is good for you. Oh yeah, this is good. Oh, fats are bad for you. Oh, and then because there's so many stories around, you can pick the stories to diss whatever you are competing against, and then you tell a sexy story about how you become the life of the party if you use this stuff, like Coca-Cola did that, right?
Yeah.
With their
Oh, yes. I
21
remember that.
teaspoons of sugar in a bottle,
I know. It's complete madness.
carbs. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this brings me to the whole conversation about industrial seed oils.
Yeah.
And the conversation I think mostly tends to center around the oils that are contained in pretty much every product these days,
Yeah.
any kind of like carbohydrate heavy product or snack food or processed food, as well as what many restaurants or the majority of restaurants cook with. So canola
Mhm.
oil, peanut
Yeah,
oil,
but
safflower.
also people at home,
Oh,
fry with,
yes,
right?
absolutely true. People at home. I know, right? I haven't cooked with any of those things in many, many years. So it's true.
Yeah.
Yes, people are still cooking with them. And
Mhm.
obviously, they're highly processed and they go through a process very similar to what you described with regard to the margarine. And so there's just this huge conversation right now. Lots of online health influencers are discussing how problematic they are for our health. And
Yep.
I know that you include a few of these oils in your supplements. So, and I know you've been talking about this a little bit. So I'd love for you to share your take on this because I
Yeah.
think that you're pretty much aligned with what a lot of people are saying now. And I feel like it's a thing you've been saying for a long time, but I am curious your thoughts.
Well, yeah, when since I've been working in this area for like over 40 years,
Yeah.
right? I got poisoned in 1980. 1981, I started working on oils made with health in mind because of what I read and what I learned. Um, and every year there's been somebody come out, don't use seed oils, don't use omega-6s, they're toxic, they're gonna give you cancer and kill you, right? That study that I did, you're gonna
Yes.
get cancer and kill you from these oils, right? And every one of those people who has done that has not done their homework, because they read the studies. The studies are done on damaged oils. When you get studies done on damaged oils, there are going to be some damaging results you're going to get, right? They're going to damage health. And they always blame the oil instead of blaming the processing.
Mhm.
And that's really not fair, because omega-6s are just as essential as omega-3s. You got to have them. You can't live without them. You got to get them from outside. You die if you don't get enough for long enough. And if you bring them back before you die, all of the problems that come from not getting enough are reversed. Definition of essential: 18 minerals, 13 vitamins, 9 essential amino acids from proteins, the 2 essential fatty acids from fats, and none from carbohydrates. No essential nutrients in carbohydrates, right? So you have to have those two, and you have to get them from outside. But they're sensitive, so don't wreck them. That's the issue, is don't wreck them in the processing. Make them with health in mind. You have to take the care of these because they're so sensitive. And when you do that, they are extremely good for you. And the omega-6s are just as essential as the omega-3s. So when these people say, oh, don't eat seed oils and omega-6s, don't eat omega-6s, they're actually giving you wrong advice based on not doing their homework. When I learned this thing, I looked deeper into it. That's what we did 40 years ago. And then we created something that addresses that problem. I call the people who talk about no seed oil, no omega-6s, I call them the complainers club, because they're just complaining about what's wrong, but they're not doing anything to fix it. Now, what are you supposed to do? Because they say, don't do omega-6s, or you have too many omega-6s. Why did you put omega-6s in your oil? That's what they say to me, right?
I was going to ask you that question, so I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Yeah, because the omega-6s you've got that you're using are damaged, and you should stop using those. But you need omega-6s, but they should be made with health in mind. That's why they're in there. We're saying to people, your body needs an oil change from damaged oils, which you need to dump, and you exchange them for oils that are clean, that are healthy, that are not damaged. So you want to replace damaged omega-6s with omega-6s in their natural state, made with health in mind. And the omega-3s you want to bring in, because 99% of the population doesn't get enough omega-3s for optimum health, and every cell requires them. And they are the most sensitive of all of the essential nutrients, and they're a nightmare to work with, which is why most people don't want to work with them. But if you give them the care they need, this is the most widespread essential nutrient deficiency of our time. And if you bring them back and they're not damaged, then they increase your energy levels, they make your brain work better. They are super important for pregnancy and childbearing, because they're important in the brain. And when a woman is pregnant, she needs to maintain her own brain, but she needs to build a whole other brain in her body. And if she doesn't get enough omega-3s, then the kid will take the omega-3s from her brain, and she will become deprived of them. And then they've shown that each child gets less than the previous child, because most women don't get enough omega-3s. And they think that's why the oldest children on average are the smartest and the youngest are the least smart on average, because there are other issues. So it's not just that. And that each child depletes the mother further. And they think that's why women get 2 to 15 times more depression, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, collagen, inflammatory, and autoimmune diseases than men do, because their depletion during childbearing sets them up for those conditions in a way that men are not set up, because men never get pregnant. Right. So and then they increase your stamina if you take the right amount and the right ratio, which is like 2-to-1 ratio, a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day, mixed in food, intake spread out over the course of the day. We've worked with athletes, and within 30 days, if they work their sport to exhaustion, they have 40 to 60% increase in stamina. We've actually did studies, a study in Denmark with all kinds of different athletes. They said their reflexes are sharper, they sleep better, their skin is nicer. If you optimize intake of the right oils, they form a barrier in the skin against the loss of moisture, so you end up with soft, smooth, velvety skin, right? I mean, and it goes on and on. They make your hair and your nails grow better. They improve. They're super important in vision. They're required for liver and kidney function. They're required for wound healing. Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And some of the athletes we worked with, they said their injuries healed in a third to a half the time. It took them longer to get exhausted. It took them a shorter time to recover. So there's like a lot of really good things that come from oils made with health in mind.
Right.
And saying that omega-6s are bad and you shouldn't use seed oils is really destructive advice. They're not thinking about health. They're just complaining about what the industry did without pointing out to the industry or going to the industry and saying, you should be doing this different. You should be making oils with health in mind because you are eating them, and eating is for health. So you should make processes, and it's doable because we did it, right?
Right.
Just have to build a really tight system. You start with organically grown seeds because there's pesticides in the oils. Again, that's not a problem of omega-6 and seed oils. That's a problem of not getting organically grown seeds. There's plastics in those oils. The plastic comes from when you put oil in plastic bottles. They actually the plastic expands, and then plastic leaches into oils quicker than into water. So that's not a problem of seed oils and omega-6s. That's a problem of packaging. So address the problem and don't just complain about it, but do something about it.
Well, I think their solution is to avoid them. So I think that's
yeah,
that's
but
what
you
they're
can't.
suggesting
But
you
you
do.
can't. But if you avoid all omega-6s, you will die.
Oh, I completely agree with that.
Omega-6s are essential, right?
Yes.
But so avoiding those oils is not a fix. You need a substitute, and that requires you to do a little more than just complain, because it's hard work to build an industry. But in free speech, the problem with free speech, the upside is you get to say what you want, right? What's the downside? Oh, you get to say what you want. It doesn't have to be true,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so anybody can come up, and you want to attract attention. Of course, you always do it by negativity. Why? Because negativity is about survival. And then we get attracted. Oh, that problem. Oh my God, do I run? What do I do here? Right? So they're actually making everybody more afraid, which is not what we need. We're already scared enough.
True.
Right?
It's very true.
Anxiety is a big issue. Depression is a big issue. So all they're giving is people more things to worry about.
Yeah.
See, and that's what's not fair about being a complainer. Now, I was a complainer too. In my 20s, I'm really good at it. You can take me to any topic under the sun, and in 5 minutes, I'll have figured out where's the limits and what's wrong with it. And I was very vocal about it in my 20s. And one day I held forth about it, and I was really vocal about it. So one day my sister put me aside after I had done one of my harangues, right? And she took me aside and she said, Udo, we agree with all this stuff you're talking about. But the problem with you is you just complain about it. You don't do anything to fix it. And that really rocked my world, because It was like, yeah, that's really true. And the reason why there's oils with health in mind is because of that conversation with my sister. And if it wasn't for that conversation with my sister, I would be just another one of those complainers.
Right.
Right.
Well,
So
you've turned that around.
Yeah. So she definitely rocked my world. And then it was like, when I wrote about it and when I found out all of this stuff, it's like, well, and then my brother also encouraged me to do it, because I just wanted to talk about it. So it's still a little complaint. He said, no, you need to do this because you know what you need to do. You know what the issues are, because if you just give that information to an industry, they may not do it the way it needs to be done.
Right.
But you know how it needs to be done. So it's up to you to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't really want to do it because I know it's how much work it is. But then it was like I couldn't come up with a counter argument for not doing it.
Right.
And then we started doing it, and that was a ton of fun, because what happened was, I found out that if we could make omega-3s made with health in mind and bring it back into the population, oh my God, we could help 99% of the population that's getting too little. Oh my God. It was like, oh my God, we could help so many people. And there's something that feels really good in the heart about helping.
I agree
And that
completely.
and that was the inspiration that drove that project. Oh my God. We worked our butts off. I mean, we literally worked all day, drove all night, did a tour through the US in 1988 was my first tour through the US in a van without air conditioning in the hottest months, July, August, and half of September, half of June. 101 days, 85 cities, 35 states, 17,000 miles by road, and literally talked to it because we were so on fire about oils with health in mind and bringing omega-3s back. And we were working with flax oil at that time. That was the first oil we developed. And
That's actually
flax oil is,
something I wanted to ask you about, if that's
yeah,
okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that because I know the ingredients in your oils, and
yeah,
would it be better for someone to be eating flaxseed instead, or
oh
versus
yeah.
taking the oil, and also like the omega-3 sources. There's obviously a lot of conversation. There's a lot of research that shows that omega-3 from animal-based sources versus plant-based sources is, more bioavailable. So what are your thoughts on
No,
all of
not,
that?
it's not. Oh yeah, it's all not true. There's lots of cheating goes on in science. That if you get a grant from the fish oil industry, you're likely to put in a good word for fish oils. But fish oils are even more damaged than cooking oils because they're 25 times more sensitive to damage done by light, oxygen, and heat than the omega-6 essential fatty acid. And that's why when you get oils, you get those burps because that's all rancidity. They also make it from the guts, and they sometimes let them sit for months, rotting, fermenting, and then they too use a chemical feast to get something useful out of them. So there's a lot behind the scenes on that. Um, um, so when I first made flax oil,
Hmm.
the guys I worked with started saying, "Oh, this is the best source of both essential fatty acids." Now, it's the best source of omega-3 because it's very high in omega-3, but it's quite low in omega-6. It's 4 times more omega-3 than omega-6. And so they were saying, I thought it was not a good source of omega-6, but they were saying that, but I didn't have proof, so I did a little experiment. I decided to use flax oil as my only oil, as my only source of fat in the diet. And within 3 months, I had dry eyes, skipped heartbeats, arthritis like pain in my finger joints, and thin, papery skin. Those are classic omega-6 deficiency symptoms, which means flax oil can make you omega-6 deficient.
Hmm.
And then I fixed that by eating sunflower seeds, which only have omega-6s but no omega-3s. So I brought the level back up. And when you get them both in the right ratio, then your health becomes very nice, right? So I did that, and then it was that, and also people said, well, this is complicated area. Every seed has different amount of oil, and every oil has a different fatty acid profile, and how do I do? Is there one thing that I can do that gets me all the good from the fat that I want, and none of the bad? And those two reasons, me getting omega-6 deficient on flax oil, and that question is the reason why we developed the blend the way we did. The blend is twice as rich in omega-3 as omega-6. There are traditional diets like that. There's no traditional diet that I know of that's 4 times richer in omega-3 than omega-6. So we made it 2 to 1. You get them both made with health in mind, and the omega-6 won't crowd out the omega-3 because it can do that. If most people probably have 10 times more omega-6, some 20, some 50 times more omega-6 than omega-3.
Right.
And then it's hard to get the omega-3 converted. So the issue of conversion, you have to have fish oil because your body can't convert. It's not true. It's never been true. And they cooked some of those studies in different ways. And when you get the ratio right, there's not a problem of conversion because the same, nobody talks about omega-6 conversion. There's conversion of omega-6 too into a whole bunch of other things. Nobody talks about that because most people get enough omega-6, although it's partially damaged and there are some side effects from that. But they talk about omega-3 as it being a problem in conversion, even though the enzymes convert omega-3 4 times quicker than omega-6s. And the reason is because people don't have enough starting material. 99% of the population doesn't get enough starting material to do the conversion. So we decided not to push fish oil, but to give them the starting material. And so when you increase the starting material to a level that's optimum, you're going to get optimum conversion, right? But the studies were not done on people, and there's lots of other issues. Like if you're vegetarian, you convert more effectively. If you take turmeric, it enhances conversion. If you have too many carbs and saturated and monounsaturated fats in the diet, that inhibits conversion. If you don't have enough B6, B3, C, and magnesium and zinc, that inhibits conversion. 80% of the population doesn't get enough magnesium, so that's going to hurt conversion. And 50 to 60% don't get enough zinc, and a third don't get enough B3, and 41% don't get enough C. And we're talking about minimum levels. We're not even talking about optimum levels.
Right.
And so there are issues that enhance conversion, and there are issues that inhibit conversion. If I want to prove that you can't do conversion, I will just get a bunch of people who are all doing all the wrong things. They're not getting the minerals and vitamins. They're eating too many carbs. They should be overweight and obese. So then we know that they're eating too many carbs, right? And then we do a study with them, and then you're going to say, yeah, there's not a lot of, and then we want to have them eating some animal product because that inhibits conversion. And we want to make sure they're not taking turmeric because that enhances conversion, right? So we can literally create a study that will prove that no conversion happens.
Right.
But before they started that, before we came out with flax oil, and the fish oil industry began to say that, there was already research that showed conversion effective both in men and women, more effective in women for DHA, which is the brain omega-3, and with very wide-ranging results from the conversion studies because of whoever they put in the study. And sometimes at the beginning, I don't think they tried to cheat. They just started cheating when we became they thought of us as their competition. I don't even think of them as our competition because I'm talking about seed oils, which are one of the pillars of nutrition. Fats, carbs, and protein are the 3 pillars of nutrition. And the amount, and these are the foods we eat the most of. So most people, how much? 2 to 4 tablespoons. And there's 14 grams in a tablespoon. So if I wanted to take it in pills, it'd be 28 to 56 pills. Well, the fish oil is only 1 to 3 pills. And the fish oil is a supplement. And this is the food foundation that I'm talking about. Now, even if the food foundation could not be converted into fish oils, you would still need the food foundation because the food foundation is wrecked. And you fix that by changing the foundation. You can't even fix that foundation by taking a supplement. No. You have to fix the foundation, right? And then if you've got the foundation right, your foundation needs to be oils made with health in mind. Right. So you get your 2 to 4 tablespoons. When you do that, you'll get probably more benefits than you'll ever get from a supplement. But some people may do better if they add a supplement to that. But you don't take a supplement instead of your foundation. That's completely crazy because it doesn't work like that.
I completely
And so
agree.
I say to people, if you want to be healthy, you got to make sure that your food oil foundation is made with health in mind. All of you need to do that. Some of you may get better results if you add a fish oil or a krill oil, which is actually less damaged than fish oil, to that. But none of you can be healthy on supplement alone. It's just not, that's just how the body works.
I agree.
So I don't know if that answers that question.
It definitely does. It was really, really helpful. I appreciate you going into depth in that because obviously, like I said before, there's so much conversation around this, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of controversy and a lot of arguments online that I see. Um,
yeah.
and no, so I do really appreciate that. And I think something before we wrap up real quick, I just want to say that what you said about the number of people who are lacking in basic micronutrients like magnesium and zinc and various others
Hmm.
is really, I think, the crux of the problem in our society, right? It's that the
Hmm.
conversion and all these other things don't happen if we don't have these
Yeah,
minerals and vitamins and
yeah,
inadequate amounts in our diet. And so it's what I preach as well. It's what we always come back to. It's like you can't build a house on a broken foundation. So
yeah.
that's
And
really
the
what it comes down to.
and the refined carbs that we're so fond of, going back to that theme,
Oh,
right?
they're so good, Udo.
Yeah, yeah, and if you look at what percentage of the essential nutrients has been taken out of grain to make white flour,
Yeah.
you're going to come up with numbers that just like the ones I gave you, except there's 42 essential nutrients. Even some of the protein is removed. All the fibers, a lot of the fiber is removed. Both essential fatty acids are removed, right? And so every step you take out of line with fresh, whole, raw, organic, it's going to cost you something in health because you're depriving your body of things that it has to have.
Yeah.
It's just like there isn't a way around it. You can't fix it. There's no quick fix for it. We have to go back to eating in line with nature.
I agree.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a problem with our modern world. It's so difficult to just do the basics in many cases for so many people.
Well,
But
it's
yes, I
well,
completely agree.
it's not difficult because in the midst of all of that junk that is made convenient, I guess that's why it's difficult, you know. But in the midst of all that junk, we can still get fresh, whole, raw, organic foods. But we have to be aware of the fact that that's important. And part of why I'm pointing out all the problems that come from not doing it is so that it might inspire you to get rid of your dirty oils and replace them with clean up oils, and get rid of your processed foods and replace them with unprocessed natural foods.
I agree. Well,
Yeah,
I thank you so much because I feel like this was very enlightening and you shared a ton of really useful information. And
yeah,
I know you have a book that you wrote a
yeah,
while ago that was super enlightening. I was reading some of it before we
yeah,
got in this interview. Can you just share that and also
yeah.
just share about your products?
Yeah, the book is called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, because they're literally two opposite stories about fats.
Yeah.
So once you understand that, you figure out which ones heal and bring them in, and which ones kill and keep them out. That's basically is why it's called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. And yeah, it's pretty much the tome on that area. Um, we developed a blend called Udo's oil. It's a blend that is properly balanced. It's in glass. It's in a box so that no light gets in. It's in the fridge. You find it in a brown glass bottle, in a box, in the supplement section, in the fridge, in the health food stores. Mostly, you can also get it on Amazon. And and then if you want more information, I have a website. It's called Udo's Choice, UDOS Choice.com. And I talk about that. I also talk about digestion and enzymes and probiotics and greens and stuff like that. And then I have another website, theudo.com, and I talk more about the big picture. What is total health? That also has to be based on human nature as well. And so it's a bigger picture that I'm working on. It's still a work in progress, but there's some. And then you can find podcasts that I've done on different, if you go on Google and say podcast Udo Erasmus or Udo Erasmus podcasts, there a bunch of them will come up, and they're usually about the total health, or they're usually about fats and digestion. So,
Thank you. Thank
and
you
I'm not
so
hard to
much.
find. I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram. I'm on
I mean, you're
LinkedIn.
everywhere.
So I'm around. Yeah, I'm not hiding.
You're like, I'm around. Also, you're 81, right? Is that
I'm
correct?
I'm 81, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I just want everyone who's listening to be inspired by the fact that you're killing it and you're doing all these amazing things and you're
Yeah.
81. And I just think that's so
Yeah.
impressive. So
I
thank
I
you.
I
It
think
speaks
I'm
for
I
your
think I
products.
I think I'm just getting started.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Udo. I'm really so grateful you came on the show and I'm so appreciative of all that you
Yeah.
shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you being an amplifier. If the message is good, the amplifier is as important as the message. So you're providing the amplifier. So thank you very much for helping spread good news.
Thank you. That's a wrap. Be sure to click that subscribe button to join me for more Girl Talk Gone Menstrual in upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, check out my latest Period Party episode. And if you're looking for a deeper dive into your hormones, go ahead and take my period quiz at nicolejardim.com/quiz.